In the year 2008, a man died of a heart attack in the small northern Swedish town of Skelleftea. His name was Curt Degerman. For more than 30 years, the people of that town had known him by another name. They called him Burk-Curt, Tin Can Curt, and nearly every one of them believed he was a homeless man with nothing. When the people handling his estate began to investigate his affairs, they found something that did not fit the man at all. In a safe deposit box in a bank in Stockholm, they found 124 bars of pure gold. In brokerage accounts, they found a substantial portfolio of blue-chip mutual funds and stocks. In bank accounts, they found a quantity of cash. The total, across the gold, the funds, the shares, the cash, came to roughly $1.5 million. Curt Degerman had never held a steady job. He had no business, no salary, no pension, no inheritance that anyone knew of. For more than 3 decades, his entire visible occupation was collecting discarded cans and bottles from the bins and gutters of Skelleftea and redeeming them for the small deposit refund that Sweden pays on each one. He was dressed in rags. He looked unwashed. The town treated him with a mixture of pity and discomfort as a vagrant, and yet, in his strange, secret, almost unbelievable way, across 30 years of being mistaken for a man with nothing, he assembled a genuine fortune in gold and stocks. 1 can at a time, with an entire town watching and not one person seeing. This is the story of how he did it, and what it can teach the rest of us. Curt Degerman was born in 1938 in Skelleftea, a town on the cold northern coast of Sweden. By the accounts of those who knew him in his early years, he was intelligent, genuinely, noticeably intelligent. He read constantly. He was articulate. He had a sharp and curious mind. Something in the course of his early adulthood turned him away from the ordinary path. Accounts differ, and we will not pretend to a certainty no one truly has. What is clear is that by his 30s, Curt Degerman had stepped almost entirely outside of conventional society. He did not pursue a career. He did not build a home in the usual sense. He took up instead a life on the streets of his own town and a single, relentless daily activity. He collected cans and bottles. In Sweden, then as now, there is a deposit system, a small refundable sum called the pant, paid on each beverage container, redeemed when the empty container is returned. It is designed to encourage recycling. For Curt Degerman, it became something else. It became an occupation, a discipline, and, though no one watching could have guessed it, the raw input of a 30-year wealth-building campaign. Every single day, in every kind of weather, Curt rode an old bicycle through Skelleftea. He went through public bins, behind shops, along the routes where people discarded their empties. He gathered cans and bottles by the hundreds. He sorted them. He redeemed them. In the deep northern winters, with the temperature far below freezing, he was out on his bicycle. In the brief cool summers, he was out on his bicycle. For more than 3 decades, with a consistency that almost no salaried worker ever matches, Curt Degerman did his rounds. He lived rough. He wore the same heavy clothes until they were filthy. He did not bathe often. He ate cheaply and sparingly, sometimes from what he could find. The people of Skelleftea, seeing him every day for 30 years, drew the only conclusion that the evidence in front of them seemed to allow. They concluded that Tin Can Curt was a homeless man, a vagrant, a person society had failed and left behind. They felt pity. Some felt unease. Almost none of them looked any closer. And that, as we will see, was the entire point. There was one place in Skelleftea where Curt Degerman could reliably be found that was not a bin or a gutter. The public library. And what he did there is the hinge of this entire story. Most days, after his collecting rounds, Curt would go to the library. He would sit, in his filthy coat, often with the smell of the street on him, at one of the public tables, and he would read the financial press. He read the business newspapers. He read the stock listings. He studied the prices of shares and the prices of commodities. He followed the markets. the Swedish market, the wider world, with the close, sustained attention of a serious analyst. Imagine the scene from the point of view of the other people in that library. They saw the town vagrant, Tin Can Curt, sitting in the corner. If they thought about him at all, they likely assumed he was there for the warmth, or for shelter, or simply because he had nowhere else to go. What they were actually watching, day after day for years, was a self-taught investor conducting careful, disciplined market research. The disguise was so complete that the truth was sitting in plain sight, in a public room, and no one read it. Curt Degerman was doing something with the small sums his cans produced. He was not letting them sit. He was taking the refund money, the pant from thousands upon thousands of redeemed cans and bottles, and he was investing it. He bought shares in solid, well-established companies. He bought into blue-chip mutual funds, and over the years, he converted a great deal of his accumulating wealth into the oldest store of value there is: gold. Bar after bar after bar of physical gold. He did this for roughly 30 years. Quietly, methodically, without telling, as far as anyone could later establish, more than one or two people in the entire world. He had, in effect, two complete lives. The visible one, the ragged man on the bicycle, pitied by his town, and the hidden one, the careful, patient capitalist, building a portfolio in gold and shares. The visible life was real, but it was also, in a sense we will come to understand, a kind of armor. The first principle of Curt Degerman's fortune was the most physically demanding, and the easiest to underestimate. It was the discipline of the daily rounds. Think about what consistency actually meant in Curt's case. He was not collecting cans on pleasant afternoons when he felt like it. He was collecting them every day in northern Sweden, where the winter is long, dark, and brutally cold. He was out on his bicycle when the temperature was far below freezing, when the streets were sheets of ice, when the daylight lasted only a few gray hours. And he was out the next day, and the day after that. For 30 years, each individual can was worth almost nothing. A few small coins, the smallest unit of value a person could reasonably bother to pick up. And this is the part worth pausing on, because it is the deepest lesson of the daily rounds. A fortune is not usually built from large, dramatic inflows. It is built from a tiny unit of value, captured relentlessly, repeated an enormous number of times. One can is nothing. One can, multiplied by every bin in a town, every day, for 30 years, is $1.5 million. There is a direct parallel here to the ordinary investor, and Curt's life makes it almost impossible to miss. Most people will never have a single dramatic windfall. They will not sell a company, or win a settlement, or inherit a fortune. What they will have instead is a modest, regular amount of money, a paycheck, arriving on a schedule. And the lesson of Tin Can Curt is that this is enough. A small amount, captured without fail and put to work every single time, is one of the most powerful financial forces in existence. Curt's paycheck was a bag of cans. He simply never, ever missed a collection. Consider also what the rounds protected him from. Curt Degerman had no employer who could lay him off. He had no industry that could collapse beneath him, no company that could fail and take his livelihood with it. His income depended on nothing but his own legs, his own bicycle, and his own refusal to stop. It was, in its strange way, one of the most secure incomes imaginable, because it was entirely within his own control. The discipline was hard, but the discipline was also a kind of freedom. We will be honest, as we always are on this channel, about the cost of this. Curt Degerman's daily discipline came wrapped in a life of genuine hardship and isolation, and we will not romanticize that. But the engine itself, the principle, is sound, and it is universal. Show up, capture the small unit of value, do it again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, for far longer than anyone around you thinks is reasonable. That is the first principle. And Curt Degerman ran it, in the snow, for 30 years. The second principle is the one that separates Curt Degerman from a man who simply collected cans to survive. Curt did not spend the money. He invested it. And once it was invested, he left it alone. Here is the distinction that matters. A great many people on the margins of society collect cans or do similar work simply to eat. The few coins come in, and the few coins go straight back out, on food and on warmth and on getting through the day. There is no shame in that. It is survival. But it is not what Curt Degerman did. Curt lived so cheaply, so far below even the tiny income his cans produced, that there was a gap, a surplus, a margin between what came in and what he allowed himself to consume. And that surplus, he invested. Think about how severe that frugality had to be. Curt's income was already among the smallest the person could earn, the deposit value of discarded cans, and he managed to spend less than even that. He lived rough precisely so that the can money would not be eaten by rent, by comfort, by the ordinary costs of an ordinary life. His ragged appearance, his hard living, these were not only the symptoms of poverty. They were also, in part, the deliberate machinery of an extreme savings rate. Curt Degerman kept his expenses at almost zero, so that almost everything could be invested. And what he invested in tells you he was no fool. He did not gamble the money. He did not chase wild speculation. He bought blue-chip mutual funds, broad, diversified holdings of large, established companies. He bought solid stocks. And he steadily converted a large share of his growing wealth into physical gold. Gold is the asset humanity has trusted across every civilization for thousands of years, a store of value that does not depend on any single company, any single government, or any single currency. 124 bars of it, bought a little at a time with the proceeds of cans across 3 decades. And here is the second half of the second principle, the half that almost no one manages. Once Curt Degerman invested the money, he did not pull it back out. He did not raid the portfolio. He did not sell the gold to make his own life more comfortable. He could have. At any point in those 30 years, Curt Degerman could have walked into a bank, sold a few bars of gold, and lived the rest of his life in genuine warmth and ease. He never did. The principle was sealed. Whatever the cans earned, and whatever those earnings then earned, all of it stayed inside the machine. Why? Why would a man endure 30 winters of hardship while sitting, the entire time, on a fortune that could have ended that hardship in an afternoon? We cannot fully know. But the structure of his choice is the same structure we see in every story on this channel. To Curt Degerman, the portfolio was not money to live on. It was the thing being built. You do not eat the foundation of a house while you are still pouring it. And Curt, for reasons that were his own, was pouring a very deep foundation indeed. The third principle of Curt Degerman's story is the strangest, and in some ways, the most instructive. His disguise protected his fortune. Consider what it means, financially, to be universally underestimated. Nobody asked Curt Degerman for money because everybody believed he had none. Nobody tried to sell him anything because he looked like the worst sales prospect in Sweden. Nobody pressured him to spend, to upgrade, to keep up, to display, because there was no audience in his life for whom such a display would have meant anything. No one envied him. No one schemed for a share of his wealth. No one even knew there was wealth to scheme for. Now compare that to the ordinary experience of money. For most people, the moment any wealth becomes visible, a set of forces switches on. Friends and family notice. Social expectations rise. There is pressure, subtle, constant, rarely spoken aloud, to live up to the apparent level of one's success. The nicer car invites the nicer house. The nicer house invites the nicer everything. Wealth, once it is seen, tends to summon the very spending that consumes it. Curt Degerman was completely immune to this. Because his wealth was never seen, it was never taxed by the social cost. of being seen. We are not, to be clear, recommending that you live in rags or let your town believe you are destitute. That is not the lesson, and we will say so plainly. But there is a real and usable principle hidden inside Curt's extreme example, and it is one of the most valuable ideas in all of personal finance. The principle is this: the appearance of wealth and the possession of wealth are two entirely different things, and they are often in direct conflict. Money spent on looking wealthy is money that cannot be invested in being wealthy. Every dollar that goes to the display is a dollar that never reaches the reservoir. The genuinely wealthy, study after study has found, are very often not the people who look it. The large house, the prestige car, the constant display, these are frequently the signs of money leaving, not money accumulating. The quiet millionaire, far more often, looks utterly ordinary. Curt Degerman is simply the most extreme illustration of this truth that the modern world has ever produced. He did not look ordinary. He looked, deliberately or not, like a man with nothing at all, while holding $1.5 million in gold and shares. The gap between his appearance and his balance sheet was perhaps the widest such gap ever recorded. So take from this principle what is true and leave what is merely extreme. You do not need to look poor, but you do need to understand, as clearly as Curt Degerman understood it, that wealth is the quiet thing you hold, not the loud thing you show. The reservoir matters. The reflection in the shop window does not. To understand how Curt Degerman managed an investment portfolio from the streets of a small town, you have to return to that library reading room. Curt was, in the most literal sense, a self-educated analyst. He had no broker feeding him ideas, no advisor managing his money, no professional in his corner. What he had was the public library, the financial press, and his own sharp and disciplined mind. He read about companies, he tracked the markets, he followed the price of gold. He made his own decisions, year after year, about where the small streams of can money would go. He was, like Ronald Read in Vermont and Ann Scheiber in Manhattan, a self-taught investor who turned a public library into a private university. There is a temperament revealed in this, and it is worth naming. Curt Degerman did not need the validation of anyone. He did not need a colleague to tell him his idea was good, or a friend to confirm that he was doing well, or a community to recognize his discipline. He simply did the work, in silence, judged by no one but himself. For most people, that degree of solitude in a long financial project would be unbearable. The human need for recognition is real, and it pulls hard. Curt was, for reasons both chosen and not, entirely free of that pull. And so nothing ever knocked him off course. There was no one to perform for, and therefore no performance to ruin the plan. But here we reach the part of Curt Degerman's story that is a genuine mourning, and we will not soften it. He kept the secret too well. He told almost no one. He left no clear instructions that anyone could readily find. When he died suddenly of a heart attack in 2008, his fortune did not pass cleanly to a chosen purpose. Instead, it surfaced slowly, through investigation. The gold bars, the funds, the cash, all uncovered piece by piece. There was an older will, leaving the estate to a charitable cause. There was a cousin who had stayed in contact with Curt and had shown him kindness, and who contested the matter. In the end, after a legal process, the cousin received the fortune. We do not tell that part to cast judgment on anyone. The cousin had, by the accounts available, treated Curt with genuine warmth, and there was a kind of justice and kindness being rewarded. We tell it because of the lesson inside it. Curt Degerman did almost everything right. He earned with discipline. He saved with ferocity. He invested with intelligence. He held with iron patience. But he did one thing wrong, and it is the very thing this channel insists on in every single episode. He had no circle. He had no trusted person fully read into the plan, no clear and findable instruction, no one positioned to carry his wishes out cleanly. And so the final destination of his life's work was decided not by Curt Degerman, but by a court. If you wanted to summarize what made it possible for Curt Degerman to compound $1.5 million from discarded cans, you could do worse than this list. An old bicycle, a library chair, a ferocious refusal to spend, 124 bars of gold, and a secret that, in the end, he kept just slightly too well. When the full extent of Curt Degerman's estate became known, the town of Skelleftea was, by every account, astonished. The shock was not only at the size of the fortune, it was at what the fortune revealed about a man they thought they had known for 30 years. For 3 decades, the people of that town had carried a simple, settled picture of Tin Can Curt. The vagrant, the failure, the man who had fallen through the floor of ordinary life. They had felt pity. Some had felt the small discomfort that the visible poor so often provoke in the comfortable. And in a single afternoon, that picture was overturned. The pitied man had been all along one of the most disciplined small investors the country had ever quietly produced. Think about how completely the town had misjudged him. They had seen a man with nothing. He was a man with a fortune. They had seen failure. He had executed one of the longest and most consistent wealth-building campaigns in the region's memory. They had seen a person to be pitied. They might, with better sight, have seen a person to be studied. The lesson is uncomfortable, and Curt's whole life delivers it. We are extraordinarily bad at telling from the outside who is wealthy and who is not. The signals we trust, the clothes, the car, the visible comfort, are not signals of wealth at all. They are, very often, signals of spending. And spending and wealth are opposites. After a legal process, the fortune, the gold, the funds, the stocks, the cash, passed to Curt Degerman's cousin, a relative who had kept in contact with him and treated him with kindness across the years. An older will had directed the money toward a charitable purpose, but in the absence of a clear and uncontested plan, the court resolved the matter in the cousin's favor. We say again, without judgment, that there is a real justice in kindness being repaid. But notice the deeper point. Curt Degerman, who controlled every other variable of his financial life with iron precision, did not control the last one. The destination of 30 years of work was, in the end, out of his hands. He had no spouse and no children. He had built, in total secrecy, a genuine fortune. But he had not done the one thing that would have let him choose, with certainty, what that fortune was for. And so the story of Curt Degerman ends with both a triumph and a caution, held tightly together. The triumph, that a man with the smallest income imaginable proved, beyond any argument, that consistency and patience can build real wealth. The caution, that wealth without a clear, shared, findable plan is wealth whose ending you do not get to write. Now, what does Curt Degerman's story actually teach us? Lesson 1. Small amounts, captured relentlessly, become large. Curt Degerman's entire fortune was built from the deposit value of discarded cans, perhaps the smallest unit of income a person can earn. He proved something that should change how you see your own paycheck. You do not need a windfall. You do not need a large income. You need a small, regular amount and the discipline to capture all of it, every time, for far longer than seems reasonable. If a man can build $1.5 million from cans, your own regular income, treated with the same seriousness, is more than enough. Lesson 2. Seal the principle. Curt's deeper discipline was not the collecting, it was the not spending. He lived far below even his tiny income, invested the surplus, and then never rated what he had invested. Not once in 30 years, even when selling a single gold bar would have ended his hardship. Most people fail here not through a dramatic mistake, but through a slow leak, a withdrawal here, a raid there. Build your machine so that money flows in and never flows back out. What the portfolio earns, the portfolio keeps. Lesson 3. Wealth is the thing you hold, not the thing you show. Curt Degerman is the most extreme proof ever recorded that appearance and net worth are unrelated. He looked destitute and held a fortune. Now, do not copy the rags, but absorb the principle completely. Every dollar spent to look wealthy is a dollar that cannot be invested to become wealthy. The display and the reservoir compete for the same money. Choose the reservoir. Almost every quiet millionaire already has. Lesson 4. Diversify and choose durable things. Here Curt was wise, and we should follow him. He did not gamble his can money on one wild bet. He spread it across blue-chip mutual funds, across solid stocks, across physical gold. If any one part had failed, the others would have stood. The modern investor can do this even more easily than Curt did, through broad, low-cost index funds that hold hundreds or thousands of companies at once. Own the whole shelf. Do not stake a life on a single name. Lesson 5. Quiet beats loud. Curt Degerman told almost no one what he was building, and for 30 years it gave him a strange and total freedom. No one pressured his money. No one envied it. No one schemed for it. No one tempted it into being spent. You do not need to vanish into silence as completely as Curt did, but understand that a wealth-building plan announced loudly is a plan exposed to 100 small pressures. The compounding that succeeds is very often the compounding that no one is watching. Lesson 6. And for Curt Degerman, this is the lesson written in what went wrong. You must have a circle. This channel says it in every episode, and Curt's story is the reason we never stop saying it. Curt controlled everything. His earning, his saving, his investing, his patience. Everything except the end. He had no trusted person fully read into his plan. He left no clear, findable, uncontestable instruction. And so the destination of 30 years of work was decided by a court, not by him. Do not make Curt's single mistake. Have a few honest, competent people who know what you are building and what it is for. Write it down. Make it clear. Make it findable. A fortune without a plan for its end is a story whose final page someone else will write. And one last reflection, the one Curt Degerman's whole life presses upon us. We are surrounded, every day, by people we have completely misjudged. The town of Skelleftea looked at a disciplined capitalist for 30 years and saw a vagrant. Somewhere near you, almost certainly, the reverse is also true. Someone admired as wealthy is quietly sinking, and someone unremarkable is quietly compounding. The lesson is not to judge the people around you. The lesson is to stop performing for them. Build your reservoir in the quiet. Let the town think whatever the town will think. Before we close, a practical bridge from Curt's story to your situation. Because a case study is only useful if it changes something this week. 1. Capture a small amount, automatically, every single time money arrives. Curt never missed a collection in 30 years. Your modern equivalent is an automatic transfer set up to move a fixed amount into a separate investment account the day after every payday, before the rest of your life has a chance to spend it. Make the capture automatic, and you have made it relentless, without relying on willpower at all. 2. Seal the account against yourself. Curt invested his surplus and then never rated it. Use a separate account for long-term investing, one with no debit card, no easy withdrawal, no casual access. The harder it is to take money out, the more reliably the money stays in. You are not punishing yourself. You are protecting the machine from the most dangerous person it will ever face, which is you on a weak day. 3. Own broad, durable things and diversify. Curt spread his wealth across funds, stocks, and gold. You can do the same, more simply, with a broad, low-cost, total market index fund holding hundreds or thousands of companies at once. If one company fails, the rest carry on. You do not need to pick the winner. You need to own the whole field and let durability and breadth protect you across the decades. 4. Stop spending to look wealthy. Curt Degerman's immunity to display was extreme, but the principle behind it is for everyone. Before any significant purchase, ask one honest question. Is this for me, or is this for the audience? Money spent on the audience is gone, and the audience forgets within a week. Money directed to the reservoir compounds for decades. You do not have to dress in rags. You only have to stop paying for a costume. 5. Build your circle and write down the plan this week. This is the practice Curt Degerman never completed, and it is the one that cost him the ending of his own story. Identify the honest, competent people who should know what you are building. Put your intentions on paper, a clear, valid, findable document that says where the money goes and what it is for. Do not leave it for later. Curt left it for later, and later arrived as a sudden heart attack with the plan still unwritten. Make the destination yours. Write it down while you still hold the pen. If you do those 5 things, even imperfectly, even slowly, you are running, on your own scale, the same program Curt Degerman ran for 30 years, but with the one piece he was missing, held firmly in place. You will probably not retrieve a fortune from a town's discarded cans, but you will end up far further along than the great majority of people who out-earned you and outspent you every single year. That is the quiet promise of compound interest, proven in the snow of northern Sweden by a man an entire town mistook for someone who had nothing. Curt Degerman spent more than 30 years riding an old bicycle through the freezing streets of his town, dressed in rags, gathering discarded cans from the bins of people who pitied him. To everyone who passed him, he was Tin Can Curt, a vagrant, a failure, a man with nothing. That was the visible life. It was almost entirely a disguise. Behind that disguise, a clever, disciplined, self-taught investor was quietly building a fortune in blue-chip funds, in solid stocks, and in 124 bars of pure gold. He earned the smallest income imaginable. He saved with a ferocity almost no one alive could match. And when the investigators finally finished their count, they found $1.5 million and a single hard lesson about the one plan he never wrote down. We talk a great deal in modern personal finance about getting rich quickly, about leverage, side income, the perfect entry, the well-timed exit. All of those things have their place, but the quiet truth, the one the financial press rarely tells, because it is slow and it does not sell, is that the most reliable path to deep, durable wealth is the one Curt Degerman walked. Patient, boring, consistent, unglamorous, decade after decade after decade, effective. If there is a North Star in this channel, a single thesis we will return to in every story, in every case study, it is this: ordinary people doing ordinary things with extraordinary patience build slow fortunes. More of them are out there right now, some of them looking like the last people on earth you would suspect, than the world will ever notice. And the country, at its best, is shaped quietly by their hands. If you want more stories like this one, stories of ordinary, underestimated people who built extraordinary things, subscribe. There is no shortage of them. We are only getting started.